What's up, guys? It's Sode back with you for Monday, March 31st. Trying to end the month strong. A month that has been anything but strong. The worst month that I've ever had, in fact. And I apologize for NHL as well, which NHL has been a pretty good sport for me. And it was good this season for most of the season, but not recently. NHL had another loss last night. We had a winning day yesterday, though, even though it was a 3-3 day. Still a winning day, so I'll take that. Partially because the last loser was the Anaheim Ducks, and I had that money line play on it. So you play less money to win the same amount on it because they're a pretty decent money line underdog, and they were in that game. I mean, they only lost by one. It was a tied game, pretty late in the third period, so they definitely had chances to do it. I don't really think it was the wrong play. If anybody took the plus 1.5 puck line on it or did that split bet, then they actually would have won some money on that. I didn't, but the 3-3 was still a small win for me. NBA continues to do really well. It was Minnesota T-Wolves, even though they had a terrible first half and they were losing the game outright, they still completely flipped it in the second half and won easily. Wound up being an easy cover, so obviously I'll take that. Baseball, both of my totals hit with the easy unders in both of those. In Red Sox Rangers first inning, there was only one run scored. The whole game went under as well. And then the full game under in the Mariners, which I may be doing again today, by the way. That was an easy one as well. Just easy unders there. And then the two sides both barely lost, basically, as we had another starter exit the game early for Baltimore as... what was the Japanese dude's name? I forget his name. The starting pitcher for Baltimore. He left the game with cramps. I mean, I guess that's what you get. That's what I get for playing two old starters, I guess, in back-to-back games in that series. Scherzer and then I forget the guy's name. I'm sorry. It was something with sugar in it. I don't know, whatever the guy's name was. Two older pitchers, and they both wind up leaving the game, so that's just great. So that didn't work out. It was a 2-run loss, and then we had the first 5-inning bet that lost, which I think lost 2-1 with 1 run in the 4th or 5th inning on the Pirates Marlins. I think I lost on the Marlins. Yeah, whatever. All right. Let's talk about today. We got a lot going on today, man, so we got to talk about it. I don't have anything in my banners yet for the games that I'm actually playing today, so I'm going to have to make sure that I know what I'm playing. Let me actually get my... betting window up here that I have and make sure that I know what my actual plays are today. Most of them are in baseball. I don't have anything in college basketball, but let's talk about it, man, because we have the college basketball crown is being played in Las Vegas at the MGM. So this is sort of the new NIT, but I'm sure a lot of teams still turn down invites to this thing. We had so you don't get any of these teams that are like massively disappointed being in here. There's no Indiana. There's no Ohio State, which is kind of unfortunate because I'd want to fade teams like that thought they were going to get into the tournament until the last second, although you could maybe argue Boise State. But let's talk about these games real quick. So in these games in general, I would want to look towards unders, although it looks like every total has gone up, which doesn't really make sense to me. I think the unders would make sense because these teams are playing in a new arena that they're not really familiar with, and they've had a lot of time off, so that can kind of mean the offense has to get back in rhythm. So I don't really understand all these totals going up, but I think unders generally make sense in a situation like this, and unders in first halves. I'm not doing it, but that's just what I generally think. Same thing that you would apply to like other tournaments. But these teams have had an extended time off, man. So the other things you might want to look for are to play on teams that had like a bad loss streak to end the season, although the teams with the worst ones are, I think, Nebraska and Arizona State, and they're playing each other. So that's not helpful either. And the other thing I would say to look for is I think the teams that play in like kind of the Mountain or Pacific time zones probably have an advantage playing in Las Vegas, especially the teams that play their conference tournaments in Las Vegas, because they won't be distracted by all the distractions that are in Las Vegas. They're not going to be distracted by gambling and hookers and cocaine and whatever else and all the lights and the drinking. So we actually have one team in every one of these games is actually a team that is from a conference that either plays or used to play in Vegas. So starting out, Utah and Butler. I lean to Utah. Utah's up from 1 to 1.5, although 62% of tickets, only 61% of the cash. Utah is the team that's more used to playing in this area, obviously. I mean, Utah's not that far from Las Vegas, so they'll probably travel a little bit better to this game as far as like if their crowd shows up. They're more used to playing in this time zone, and they used to be in the Pac-12 until this season, and they played in Vegas for their conference tournament. So Utah, much more used to doing this than Butler is, who's having to come out here from Indianapolis and playing in the Big East. They don't go out this far west usually. So I think a little bit of an advantage to Utah there, even though KenPom actually has Butler literally one ranking spot above Utah. But I would lean to Utah there, especially the price is basically just pick the winner. So, and then you have George Washington and Boise State. Boise State sitting at an 8.5-point favorite, 71% of tickets, 88% of the cash. Boise State, I mean, they were the closest out of any of these teams to making the actual tournament, as they made the Mountain West final. So if they won that game, they would have been in the tournament. But I think they thought that maybe even with that loss to Colorado State that they had a chance to get in that large bid, and it didn't happen. So Boise State is probably the most disappointed team here, but they are playing out in Vegas, and they're from the Mountain West. The Mountain West, they play their tournament in Las Vegas, so Boise is definitely used to it. Boise was just in Las Vegas to finish their conference tournament, so they literally played in Las Vegas the last time they played, so they do have an advantage for that reason. George Washington having to fly out across the country definitely puts them at a bit of a disadvantage. Question is, how disappointed is Boise State going to be? But then the other problem with laying this amount of points with Boise State is they play slow, which is not as conducive to covering a large number. So we'll stay away. Nebraska and Arizona State. Nebraska up from 4.5 to 5, 57% of tickets, 58% of the cash. So some of the money coming in Nebraska. I don't really agree with that one. I don't know if Nebraska is going to be really disappointed or not, but maybe they'll be a little bit angry because they actually completely missed out on the Big Ten tournament. So they went from looking like they might have an at-large case to get into the actual tournament to not even making the Big Ten tournament at all, which is crazy. So both of these teams actually wound up on pretty bad loss streaks at the end of the season. Arizona State did play one game in the Big 12 tournament and lose. Arizona State is more used to playing in Vegas because they were also in the Pac-12 like Utah was. So they used to play their conference tournaments up through last year in Vegas. So they are a bit more used to it. Will Nebraska show up is kind of the question here, but also KenPom doesn't have Arizona State that much further down in the rankings, although he does have Nebraska as the better team on both sides of the ball. Both teams play kind of a similar pace, like mid-tempo. Arizona State likes to play a little bit faster than Nebraska does. Nebraska is also used to going out to the West Coast a little bit because they did play at Oregon and Washington this year in the weird new Big Ten setup, and Nebraska actually won both of those games. Not surprising they beat Washington, but beating Oregon, definitely a surprise, pulling off that upset. You wouldn't really expect that. Nebraska really wasn't that good away from home this year, and they kind of struggled down the stretch at home as well. Definitely struggling quite a bit, costing me some bets there. Nebraska was a very tough team to get a gauge on. And then I will say KenPom does have this number. Out of all four of these games, KenPom has the biggest number discrepancy in the spread in this game, as he has Nebraska only winning by 3. So take from that what you will. I do kind of lean towards taking the points with Arizona State, but not strong. And then Georgetown having to fly across the country to face Washington State. Georgetown up from 3 to 3.5, but 66% of the tickets coming in on them, 79% of the cash coming in on Washington State. Public would prefer to have the Big East team and the team that has that name recognition behind them, although we know Georgetown's program hasn't been good for a while, and they're in kind of a rebuild right now. They are starting to improve, but I think Washington State does have the advantage here because they, again, are more familiar with playing in Vegas, as they literally just played in Vegas as well, just like Boise did. Washington State was here for the Mountain West tournament, the WCC tournament, the West Coast Conference tournament, Boise in the Mountain West. So Boise and Washington State, I think, have the biggest location advantages here. And then Utah to some extent, and then Arizona State. So those are the ways that I lean, but I'm not playing any of those games. Move over to NHL. I do have one play in the NHL. We don't have a whole lot going on in the NHL, but I am going to play in this first game up. And let me get the Got to get this going and got to get the banners up, man. So this is going to be a play on the Minnesota Wild, even though I know I dog on the Minnesota Wild a lot because they are overrated in my opinion. But this is a spot that makes sense to play the Minnesota Wild in my opinion. New Jersey's down from -1 or up actually from -145 to -150, excuse me. But 50% of the tickets and 84% of the cash coming in on Minnesota. So it looks like the cash percentage is on Minnesota, and I agree with it. These two teams just played. New Jersey just won at Minnesota. New Jersey is pretty secure in their playoff spot right now. They're in the Metro division, so even though they're sitting in third place in the Metro, both of the top wildcard teams are in the other division in the Atlantic, so New Jersey has almost no chance of dropping out of that third spot in the Metro. There's no team in the Metro that's really that close to them. I think the Rangers are probably the closest. Oh, wait, excuse me. What am I saying? New Jersey, excuse me. I'm going against New Jersey. What am I saying here? New Jersey, yeah, I mean, they're probably not going to drop out of the third spot in the Metro, as that is where they are right now. Although, actually, excuse me, because I'm completely wrong, actually, because Ottawa's in the other division. Never mind. What am I saying? Ottawa's in the Atlantic. Ottawa's 1 point behind them, but Ottawa in the driver's seat. So the Rangers are actually the closest, and they're 8 points behind. So the Devils may be pretty secure there, but the Devils, I believe, do face the Rangers next. So I think it's a little bit of a sandwich spot for the Devils because that is a big game against the Rangers. They do have a lot of time off after this game, but it's also a weird spot because they're returning home from the road trip. They're playing a third game in 4 days, a fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities, and a fifth game in 8 days, and they just beat this same Minnesota team. And again, they're returning back home for a road trip, even though it was less than a week. They still went out to Winnipeg, Minnesota, so they were kind of out in the prairie land there. So returning home, they could be a little bit distracted upon the return home. And again, they just beat Minnesota on Minnesota's own ice. So Minnesota, I think, is going to be extra motivated here to get that quick revenge, and they're going to be the team that has the adjustments to make. So it's a return home spot for New Jersey, and it is a zigzag spot for Minnesota. Minnesota, if you look at them in the standings here. Let me see if it'll load because I want to try to get this done quickly. Sorry, I got to rush through this, man, but we have a lot of stuff we got to do in life. Minnesota, they're in the Pacific, or no, not the Pacific. They're in the Central. What am I saying? Obviously, they're in the Central. So they're 6 points out of the Central, but they are also battling to stay in the wild card hunt here as they're 6 games up above Vancouver. So they're sitting nicely right now, but I do think this is going to be a spot where Minnesota does want to show up. They just lost at home, and now they're starting a road trip against that exact team that just beat them. So starting a road trip, I think, is a focus spot. They did have an extra day off in there, so they actually have a rest advantage. And again, starting a road trip, focus spot, returning home from a road trip like New Jersey is unfocused spot because you have to return to home life and whatever. And on top of all that, it's a quick road revenge adjustment angle, zigzag spot for Minnesota. So I like all that. We're getting Minnesota as an underdog price, which is justified because I think Minnesota is a bit overrated. But in this spot, I'm going to grab Minnesota. I think it makes sense to do that. And I think that's about it for that one. I don't even know if I want to talk about any of these other hockey games, man. I mean, we got big spreads in a couple of these and just garbage teams in the other ones. So Calgary is still fighting to try to get into the playoffs, by the way. So you could argue maybe for looking at Calgary, but they're in a bad spot. I mean, they just lost a close game to Edmonton, and they're playing a few games, I think, in quick succession. So I don't think it's that great a spot, even though Calgary is more desperate than Colorado is. Let's move over to the NBA. Try to get this done fast. I do have one play in the NBA. We have a decent-sized NBA card here. Not a whole lot that I'm looking at in this NBA slate here. I mean, Sacramento and Indiana. Sacramento, they're still fighting for one of the play-in spots in the West, and I think Indiana's still fighting for maybe trying to get a home series in the playoffs. So both teams do have some reason to show up. Sacramento just got torched by Orlando, though, losing by 30 points. So Sacramento may have something to say about that, may want to bounce back from that. And Indiana, what did they do? They lost to OKC. They did not do well in that game against OKC. They're returning home from a road trip. It was a quick 2-game road trip, so they haven't been away for that long. So I don't know what I would do with this game. Pacers are up from 5 to 5.5 with juice, so some money has come in on them. Don't really see the percentages yet. I'm staying away from that. But the game that I am playing, let me get it in here, is going to be on the Orlando Magic, even though they did just win in a blowout, plus 3.5. I think Orlando needs this game a little bit more than the Clippers do, even though the Clippers are still fighting to, I believe, stay out of the play-in game. So there is motivation on the Clippers side as well. There's a big, just pack of teams in the West there. But Orlando is also, I believe, fighting to stay as one of the home teams in the play-ins, I'm pretty sure. So both teams do have something to fight for. And then that means that you got to look at what the situation is. And I think the situation for the Clippers is not as good. Clippers played Cleveland last night. So now they're playing a third game in 4 days, a back-to-back, and a fourth game in 5 days. Is that right? No, fourth game in 6 days, all in different cities. And against Cleveland, they were getting blown out in that game, and they didn't go away. They came all the way back. I think Kawhi Leonard might have been rested in that game, so maybe he's going to play in this game and be rested. I guess you got to look at the injury report to figure out what's going on with him. He's a game-time decision. I mean, as usual, he's an old man. They keep resting him, but still, L.A. mounted a huge late comeback in that game against Cleveland and fell just short. So after that, turning around right away and having to go down to Orlando from Cleveland with no time off, I don't think it's a very good spot. It's a bad rest spot. It's a bad travel spot for them. Orlando, even though, they're coming off a nice, easy win over Sacramento, I don't think they're going to take their foot off the gas. They're playing pretty well right now, winning 4 of the last 5, staying at home here to finish up this homestand. They got a good Clippers team coming into their place. I like Orlando in this one, and I think the public is going to look at this and want to take the Clippers. They're actually down from 4-3 with juice. They're looking public, 73% of tickets, but 96% of the cash. Worries me a little bit, but I think this is a bad spot for the Clippers, man. Like I said, even though the Clippers are fighting to avoid the play-in spots there, Orlando is fighting to stay in one of the home play-in spots there. So both teams do have something to play for. Again, with a team like the Clippers coming in, I do think Orlando will be focused. I don't think they're going to be too high on themselves after beating Sacramento. I mean, you're still a below 500 team. So I will take the points with the Orlando Magic and hope that it's not tragic. I mean, my NBA has been one of my best sports, so hopefully my gauge is still on there. And then we do have 2 TNT games, Boston. My Celtics are at the Grizzlies. Celtics down from 5 to 4.5. Celtics playing a lot of games on the road here, man. They've had some rest in between some of these games here, and they've won every game on the road trip. So, I don't know, man. Are they going to have anything left? I mean, Memphis is a good team, but are the Celtics going to just figure, well, this is a very successful road trip and not have anything left at this point? I mean, they could still technically catch Cleveland. Probably not going to happen. Memphis is probably going to be extra focused for this game. Memphis is fighting, I believe, to avoid the play-ins as well, or they're fighting for some playoff positioning, whereas the Celtics are nearly locked into the 2 seed. Now, Memphis has lost 4 of the last 5 games. The last one was a return home game against L.A., even though that is a big game against the Lakers. They still lost that game, and again, the return home spot is a tough spot to overcome those return home distractions, man. And if you don't play well, then in the second game, you do tend to be focused. You're going to be focused because it's Boston, so I would lean to taking the points with Memphis in that one. And then we do have Houston at the Lakers is the other TNT game. Lakers up from 4.5 to 5. Houston looking like a public underdog. 56% of tickets, only 51% of the cash. I mean, Houston does have the better record than the Lakers. The spot maybe doesn't look that great for Houston. They're coming off annihilating Phoenix by almost 40 points. Whenever you do that, you're going to be feeling a little bit high on yourselves. Houston playing very, very good basketball right now, having lost only 1 game since March 4th. And it was a very close game at home against Denver. They're playing on a back-to-back as well, so that makes it a little more difficult for Houston as well. The Lakers coming off beating Memphis, though, and they are turning home from a road trip, so it's not really the easiest spot for them either. They have a little bit more rest, but returning home from a road trip where they've been on the East Coast, basically, and not having been home for a week, I think that makes it a difficult spot for the Lakers as well, so I will stay away. Maybe the over would be worth a look in this game. Total down from 225.5 to 224.5. I don't really agree with that move. 88% of tickets, 89% of the cash on the over. It is going to be a public over, but even though the Rockets do play defense, the Lakers are less defense-oriented and more offense-oriented with Luka there. So the Lakers probably going to see some high-scoring games from the Lakers down the stretch. This could be one of them, especially if defense is not really the focus for these teams, with the Rockets being on a back-to-back and the Lakers returning home from a road trip. So the over might make sense in that game. And let's move over to MLB, where I do have a bunch of plays. We have a huge slate of MLB games today. And again, you want to look towards, you want to look to try to maybe go against teams that pulled off a sweep, maybe play on teams that got swept. That's kind of the way to look in these games, although I'm not quite doing that because this is still a matchup sport, man. So I am still looking at matchups here, and I forget what games I even have plays on here. The first thing I do on Monday is, well, first of all, I thought it was going to be a shorter MLB slate, but I also look towards, I look to fade teams that played in the night game, but we can't do that here because San Diego, I don't trust this Kyle Hart guy, man. I mean, he's a guy that I don't think has pitched for like a couple of years, and when he did pitch, he wasn't good. Luis Ortiz is the more known quantity. He's playing for a new team this year, but I just don't think I could fade San Diego. For those reasons. Ortiz doesn't have great numbers against San Diego, I don't think. But, yeah, so take from all of that what you will. San Diego is staying at home as well. And Cleveland is having to travel out to the Pacific Coast. So maybe not the greatest spot to potentially fade San Diego, although they won a series against the Braves with a win in the ESPN night game last night. And Atlanta was also in that game. Atlanta I would be more inclined to fade because they have to face Glasnow, who is returning from ending last season on the injured list. He is going to finally pitch again, and he has good numbers against Atlanta. So if he's ready to go, the Dodgers should be able to win that game. So you could look to maybe lay run lines or something with the Dodgers. And by the way, I forgot to mention with the run lines, you can get a -1 run line at DraftKings, where you do have to lay more of a price, but at least if they win by 1, you'll push instead of losing the bet. So that's just something to note. I know on the Dodgers, the last time I played, I did play a full run line on it, but the 1.5, and I kind of got lucky on it. But with the Dodgers, and a lot of times they do win by 1, so it kind of does make sense to play the -1 run line on them. Let me get all my plays in here. Hopefully I can get this done quick. I'm probably not going to talk about any of the games I'm not on, by the way, except for that San Diego game, which I already talked about. Let me see here. Just for the purposes of getting this done, I have 5 MLB plays, 2 totals, and 3 sides, actually. So let me get these in. I don't know how I'm going to get these done in time, man. Should I just do the afternoon ones and then come back and do the evening ones, or should I try to race through this? Hang on, let me see. We got, trying to get all these in here. I can tell you what they are while I'm doing it, by the way, if you want, but let me see. I'm trying to just get these in, get these thrown into the banners just so I can show them here. That is an under 8 at -105. And then we got, let me see here. Man, I should have done this before. Hold on. One of them is a Seattle under, so that's not going to be a surprise. And then we got one more under. Let me see here. Yeah. Oh, no, one more side. Yeah. And it is a first. I have one first 5 play, I think, that is a side. All right, let's get right into this. First play up is going to be on the Texas Rangers, -118. I don't even know if I have any afternoon games. Actually, we're starting in the evening. We're going to fade the Cincinnati Reds here. Again, excuse me, this is more as I'm vomiting in my mouth because this play is so disgusting. No, not really. Just because Texas beat my Boston Red Sox. Texas has flipped from +107 to -112. So they flipped to the favorite. 80% of tickets, 85% of the cash coming in on Cincinnati. Although I think Cincinnati is going to wind up being a home underdog here. I think public is going to look at this and say, oh, I know who Brady Singer is. He was on the Royals. Pitched pretty well, and I have no idea who Kumar Rocker is. Well, Kumar Rocker, you heard me talk about him a little bit last year. He is a flamethrower, man. I mean, he could throw pretty hard. He's a 6'5" dude on the mound. Had a good ERA in a few starts last year, so he has a few starts under his belt in the majors. His whip was bad. I know he walked too many guys. He's a little wild. Got to get that under control, but he is an intimidating presence with some good stuff and a really good fastball. And he's got the advantage because the Reds have never seen him before, man. So that's where we're going with this. And then we do have Brady Singer, who I know he has one start in his career against or at the Reds, and it was a good start in this in the stadium. Great American Ballpark tends to be a hitter's park, so he actually did well the one time he pitched here. But I don't know, man, if he's going to be able to acclimate right away to being on a new team here like this. He's up against Texas. Texas is at least familiar with him. He's on a 233 average, but he has walked 7 guys in 60 at-bats. 19-7 strikeout walk ratio isn't that good. He's allowed a decent amount of extra base hits. It's a 713 OPS, which is still not that bad, but it's getting into the realm where it's like, yeah, he's a little bit hittable, and I'm going to go with the pitcher that's the complete unknown because, as I always say, the pitcher who hitters have not faced before in a major league environment, like in an actual live game environment, the pitcher tends to have the edge because the hitters don't know what to expect yet, and they're not used to facing him. So we're going to go with Rocker there. The market seems to be indicating on that pretty heavily if you're getting Texas as a road favorite here, and it looks like it's flipped a little bit, so we'll go with that. We'll go full game because the bullpen's kind of had similar usage yesterday, so that's what we'll go with, even though Cincinnati is staying at home. Texas is starting a road trip, so that is also a focus spot, really. You want to be focused when you start a road trip, even though they just swept the Red Sox. The Red Sox just suck right now, so I don't know if Texas is really going to care that much about that. Next up, we got Minnesota plus 130, so I'm going to play on the Minnesota Twins. Is that right? Is that what I'm doing? I don't even know. Why was I thinking that? No, not Minnesota. Wait, why does it say Minnesota? Hang on. What? Oh, no, never mind. Minnesota, that was my hockey play. Never mind. I'm not playing on the Minnesota Twins, even though Paddock might have a little bit of an advantage. They're a big favorite against Martin Perez and the White Sox. Minnesota probably should win that game. They have a lot of money coming in on them, but I'm not going to lay a huge price with them. So excuse me, I actually only have 4 MLB plays. Sorry about that. So I have Texas. And then 2 totals. All right, let's go with it. One total is San Francisco, Houston under 8 and minus 105. I like this one as well. A lot of these interleague games, you kind of want to look towards unders because you got pitchers that in general are kind of going to be more unfamiliar to the hitters. So I think that's kind of an advantage to the pitchers for the most part. As I say, that when the pitchers are unfamiliar to the opposing hitters, they tend to have the advantage here. By the way, I do lean to Bowden Francis as well with Toronto. They're up from minus 150 to minus 150 out. A little cash is coming back on Washington. 66% of the cash with 53% of tickets on Toronto. But Toronto's staying at home. Washington just beat Philly, which was a big win. I don't trust Soroka. His career numbers aren't really that good. I don't think he has that much history against Toronto. Bowden Francis hasn't been seen that much by Washington either. And Francis was one of the best pitchers in baseball down the stretch last year, man. He turned into a really good pitcher down the stretch and was completely under the radar. So that's the way I look there. But back to this. Giants, Astros, we're going under. Totals down from 8.5 juice to the under to 8.5 juice. More to the under. 73% of tickets. 97% of the cash coming in on the under. Houston, I believe, has played every game under the total so far. Big time under. So it's like, well, how are you still getting 8.5? I mean, it looks like the 8.5 is so high. It looks like you might have a tendency to want to go over here, but I would not agree with that here. A lot of these games in somewhat cool weather, although I know it's in Texas. It's not going to be that cool. But in the early season, a lot of these games tend to go under. And I think the matchup is conducive to it. We didn't have a ton of bullpen usage from either team yesterday, so I think that's fine. Jordan Hicks is pitching. His numbers weren't good last year. 1.45 whip was actually pretty awful and indicative that his ERA should have been higher than 4.1. But he's still a young guy, and he doesn't have that much familiarity with some of these American League teams, so that's why I'm doing this. Houston's offense should be a little bit down this year without Bregman, and they lost, who else did they lose? They lost Bregman, and they lost Justin Tucker, I think. So that's a little bit of a downgrade in Houston's offense, and we've seen that so far this season. But Houston, in 28 at-bats, only hits Hicks to a tune of 214 average and 695 OPS, so Hicks has kept them limited, so that looks good. And then on the other side, Ronel Blanco, even though he was using pine tar, he looked pretty good last year. He kind of came from out of nowhere and had a really good season last year. And we'll see if that continues this year. But up against the San Francisco Giants, I almost said the 49ers, we have limited sample size. So some of these guys haven't even seen him before. But the ones who have seen him in 15 at-bats worth, only hit him to the tune of a 200 average and 561 OPS. So he has held them to low hitting numbers. So we'll go with the under in that game. Next up, we got another under, and that is, as I said, we're going with another Seattle under. I like this one too. Under 7.5, although you have to pay a little bit more to get the under 7.5. 7, as I said, is a key number in baseball because the 7 is how you break the 3-3 tie. Looking at this game, I like the under here too. Detroit, Seattle, neither team used a lot of their relief staff yesterday. Seattle not traveling. Detroit is already on the Pacific Coast. I don't know if any of that really matters that much, other than I think what matters is the fact that this is a night game in Seattle, so it's pretty conducive to a low-scoring game. And the pitching matchup I like for it, we have Jackson Joby pitching for the Tigers, who only has made 2 major league appearances. He's only 22 years old. He has good stuff according to the scouting reports, man, which is why he's in the starting rotation here. He can throw in the upper 90s. He's got 4 pitches. His command is his only issue, really. Although last year in 4 innings, he only walked 1 guy in his short major league stint last year. So that's not that bad. He has some really good breaking stuff when he does have command over it. He does throw a pretty nasty slider, apparently. He's got a decent changeup, and he throws a cutter. And I guess his fastball does have some pretty nasty movement to it as well. And it's in the upper 90s. Like I said, he's a pretty nasty pitcher. And, of course, Seattle has never seen him before because he's barely pitched in the majors. So he should have an advantage early on. When you have these young guys who, if you look at the scouting report, and they have good stuff, and there's a reason why they're starting in the starting rotation. It's not because they're filling in for an injured player or anything like that. They think this guy's good enough to be in the rotation. So I'm going to go with it. Pretty decent starting rotation for Detroit, if that's the case, with him being behind Olsen and Skubal there. So I think he does have the advantage early on against Mariners hitters who aren't really that good anyway and who haven't seen him before. And then on the other side, Emerson Hancock. His stats weren't that good last year. 4.75 ERA, not good. 1.34 whip, not really that good. But what I am going to go with is I think he's going to get himself under control a little bit. He's still young. He's 25. Got a couple of seasons under his belt now. May start to improve a little bit. He's got to get his walk numbers down. He's not a strikeout pitcher, but he's got to get his command under control, really. But other than that, I think he's a decent pitcher, and he's up against a Detroit lineup that I don't know if it's really that potent. And Detroit basically hasn't seen him before. No, they actually have never seen him before. So we have an advantage on both sides of the mound here, where neither pitcher has ever been seen before by the opposing hitters. So that's an advantage to the pitchers. Give me the under. And then to finish this off, we're going a first 5 inning on the Cubs at minus 125. So, of course, if it is tied through the first 5, we'll get a push on that if that's what your book's rules are. I like the Cubs side here. Although we do have it, the Cubs are up from minus 109 to minus 126 on the full game, but they're public, 84% of tickets. Public is not going to be coming in on Oakland, although I'm a little bit worried that 58% of the cash coming in on Oakland, but I like the Cubs in this one. And the reason for the first 5 is that the Cubs used a lot of their relievers yesterday, and the Athletics, I keep saying Oakland, the homeless A's didn't really use much of their bullpen. So I'm going to take the bullpens out of the equation and only go with the starting pitching matchup here for the most part. Cubs coming off a pretty ugly loss to Arizona where they had the lead and they gave up 8 runs in one of the late innings of that game. Just kind of brutal. So I do think they're going to kind of want to bounce back from that. They're staying kind of out in the Pacific time zone area for the most part. So I think getting out of there and going to a different location I think is going to help after that kind of nasty loss there. And they got Ben Brown on the mound here. And Brown, his numbers this season look awful, but I think this is an advantage because he had one bad start, but it was against the Dodgers, who have probably the most potent lineup in Major League Baseball. And it was in Tokyo, so it was one of those weird Tokyo games. He only went 3 innings or whatever, something like that. I don't think you can really put much stock into that at all. I think usually you could throw out a pitcher's first start of the season if they don't do well. It's not really that much of an indicator, and I think you get value on Brown because he didn't do well in that first start, but he is actually not a bad pitcher. Again, that was against the Dodgers, so you can take that with a grain of salt. Last year, he pitched pretty well with a 3.58 ERA, 1.08 whip, although some of it was out of the bullpen. Good strikeout walk numbers as well, high strikeout rate, so that all looks good. So he's better than his first start this season would indicate, and he's up against Oakland or whoever they are, the A's, who have never seen him before. So Brown has the advantage there as well because they've never seen him before. And he's actually a guy with good stuff. And the fact that he has a start out of the way already gives him an advantage as well because he gets those opening day like nerves out of the way. He's already pitched once. So he has an advantage in that way too. He's ready to go. Whereas Joey Estes has not pitched yet this year. And his ERA was bad last year. It was over 5, although his whip was indicative that his ERA should have been better than that. 1.23 whip wasn't that bad, but he's kind of a guy that gets hit around a little bit. And up against the Cubs, they've seen him a bit, and his numbers are really not good. And even though it's only in 16 at-bats, they have a 2-2 strikeout walk ratio against him, but they also have hit him to the tune of 500 with a 1,243 OPS. I know it's a small sample size, but he has struggled against these Cubs hitters, and he does not have a start under his belt yet, although he's a young guy too, so he'll probably get a little bit better as his career progresses. His ERA was misleadingly bad last year, but I think that we get the advantage from Ben Brown in this starting pitching matchup. So that's where I'm going with it. And that's going to do it, man. My plays one more time: Minnesota Wild in hockey plus 130, Orlando Magic plus 3.5 in the NBA, MLB Texas Rangers minus 118, under in 49ers. In San Francisco, Houston under 8 minus 105. Tigers, Mariners under 7.5 minus 118, and Cubs first 5 innings minus 125. That's going to do it. Tower Gang Toad on Twitter, patreon.com/Tower Gang to support the most offensive podcast in existence. Let's have a good Monday. Kick off the week right. Let's finish the month with a good winning day. Peace.